I never thought clearing snow from my own driveway would lead to a war with the most vindictive homeowners association in Colorado. But here I am, watching their emergency meeting through my window while three board members stand knee-deep in snow they can't clear themselves. My name is Trevor Whitmore, and I moved to Pinewood Hills, a planned community outside of Boulder, Colorado, about 5 years ago. The place seemed perfect at first. Mountain views, decent neighbors, and most importantly for my business, a large corner lot with direct access to both the main community road and a service road that connected to Highway 36. I ran a small landscaping and property maintenance company, so having that extra access was crucial for my equipment trucks. The trouble started this past January when we got hammered with back-to-back snowstorms. Colorado winters are no joke, and that particular month dumped nearly 4 feet of snow on us over 2 weeks. I had been using my commercial-grade snow blower to clear my driveway, which is about 150 feet long and connects to what the HOA calls Pinewood Access Road. This road wasn't just mine. It served as the primary access route for the community's maintenance vehicles, delivery trucks, and emergency services to reach the back section of our neighborhood where about 30 homes sat. Here is where things get complicated. When I bought my property, the previous owner, an older gentleman named Frank, had maintained that access road for years. He had the equipment, and he liked staying busy in retirement. The HOA never officially took responsibility for it because it was technically on private property, a weird quirk of how the development was originally platted back in 2008. The road ran along the edge of my lot and 2 other properties before connecting to the main community entrance. When Frank moved to Arizona, he mentioned to me that he just did it as a courtesy, but there was nothing in writing requiring it. I had continued the tradition because it seemed like the neighborly thing to do. My equipment was already out there, and it took maybe an extra 30 minutes to clear the access road after doing my own driveway. Plus, the HOA had always been reasonable. Well, they used to be reasonable before Patricia Hendricks became the board president. Patricia moved into Pinewood Hills about 2 years ago and immediately started climbing the HOA ladder. She was one of those people who thrived on minor authority. Mid-50s, perfectly styled blonde hair that never seemed affected by Colorado's dry climate, and a voice that could cut through steel when she was unhappy about something. She drove a white BMW X5 and wore athleisure outfits that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. The morning of January 15th, I was finishing up clearing my driveway and the access road. We had gotten another 8 inches overnight, and I had been out since 6 in the morning. My snow blower was a beast, a commercial-grade 2-stage machine that could throw snow 30 feet. I had developed my own efficient method over the years. Instead of the traditional back-and-forth pattern, I would clear in a circular spiral pattern, starting from the outside and working inward. It was faster and prevented me from having to double back over areas. The snow would arc beautifully through the air and land in consistent piles on either side. I was almost done, maybe 10 minutes from finishing, when Patricia's BMW pulled up next to me. She rolled down her window, and I could see she was already irritated about something. I shut off the snow blower. "Good morning, Patricia," I said, trying to be friendly despite the cold. "Mr. Whitmore, I need to discuss your snow removal technique with you," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. I looked around, confused. The road was clear. My driveway was clear. "Is there a problem? I am almost finished." "Yes, there is a problem. Your method is completely unacceptable. You are throwing snow in a haphazard pattern that creates uneven piles. The HOA requires all snow removal to follow proper protocols. I stood there for a moment, genuinely baffled. Patricia, I have been clearing this road for 5 years. Nobody has ever complained. The road is clear and safe. Well, I am complaining now. As HOA president, I am responsible for maintaining community standards. Your spiral method, or whatever you call it, violates our snow removal guidelines section 12.4. Section 12.4. I pulled off my gloves. Patricia, I have read the HOA rules. There is nothing about snow removal methods in there. She smiled in that condescending way some people do when they think they have won an argument. We updated the guidelines at last month's board meeting. All homeowners were notified by email. I had not received any email, but I was not going to argue about it in 15-degree weather. Okay, what exactly does this guideline say? Snow must be removed in straight, parallel lines with snow piled evenly on both sides at a height not exceeding 4 feet. Your circular method creates irregular patterns, and some of these piles are clearly over 4 feet. The absurdity of the situation was not lost on me. Patricia, the road is clear. The method does not matter as long as the job gets done. The method absolutely matters. Standards exist for a reason, Mr. Whitmore. I am issuing you a formal warning. If you continue to violate this guideline, there will be fines. She drove off before I could respond, her tires spinning slightly in the snow I had not yet cleared from the far end of the road. I stood there, snow blower idling, wondering if I had just imagined that entire conversation. I finished clearing the road using my normal method, because I was not about to waste time doing it any other way. The whole thing seemed ridiculous, and I figured Patricia was just on a power trip that would blow over. 2 days later, I found an official HOA violation notice in my mailbox. Fine. $250 for non-compliant snow removal methods. A picture was attached showing my irregular snow piles. I immediately called an emergency meeting with the HOA board. Besides Patricia, there was Marcus Reynolds, the vice president, and Linda Sawyer, the treasurer. We met at the community clubhouse on a Tuesday evening. This fine is absolutely unreasonable, I said, sliding the notice across the table. I have been maintaining that access road as a courtesy for 5 years. There is no requirement for me to do it at all. Marcus, a reasonable guy in his 40s who worked in tech, looked uncomfortable. Trevor, I hear what you are saying. The thing is, Patricia did get the guidelines updated and technically nothing, I interrupted. First of all, I never received notification of these new guidelines. Second, this is completely arbitrary. My method works. The road gets cleared efficiently and safely. Patricia leaned forward, her manicured nails clicking on the table. Mr. Whitmore, this is not personal. We have standards in this community. If we allow one homeowner to disregard them, it opens the door for chaos. Chaos. I could not help but laugh. Patricia, we are talking about snow removal patterns. The road is clear. That is all that matters. The aesthetics of our community matter, she insisted. Those irregular piles are visible from several homes. Residents have complained. Which residents? I asked. She waved her hand dismissively. That is confidential, of course it is. I took a breath, trying to stay calm. Look, I am happy to keep clearing the access road, but I am not paying this fine, and I am not changing a method that has worked perfectly well for years. Linda, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. She was in her 60s and usually stayed out of conflicts. Trevor, could you maybe try the parallel method, just to avoid any more issues? Linda, it would add at least 20 minutes to the job. 20 minutes in sub-zero temperatures. For what? So the snow piles look prettier. Patricia stood up. The fine stands, Mr. Whitmore. You have 30 days to pay, and if you continue to use non-compliant methods, the fines will increase. This meeting is adjourned." I drove home furious. That night, I pulled out my property deed and all the HOA documentation I had received when I bought the house. I went through everything with a fine-tooth comb. And there it was, the detail I had half remembered but never thought would be relevant. The access road was not HOA property. It was an easement that ran across my property and the two adjacent properties. The HOA had no legal authority over it. Frank, the previous owner, had maintained it voluntarily, and I had continued doing so as a courtesy. But there was absolutely nothing requiring me to do it. I called my lawyer the next morning. His name was David Chen, and he had handled my property purchase 5 years ago. "David, I need you to look at something for me," I said, explaining the situation. He pulled up the digital files from my purchase. "Yeah, I remember this. That access road is technically private property. The easement allows passage, but maintenance is not assigned to anyone. The HOA probably assumed it was their responsibility, but it is not actually written anywhere. So I have no obligation to maintain it. None whatsoever. You have been doing it voluntarily. You could stop tomorrow and you would be completely within your rights." An idea was forming in my mind. What if they keep fining me for my snow removal method? If the road is private property and you are maintaining it voluntarily, they have no authority to dictate how you do it. Those fines are unenforceable. I can send them a letter if you want. "Hold off on that for now," I said. "Let me think about this." I spent the next few days weighing my options. I could fight the fine, have David send a letter, and probably win, but Patricia would just find something else to target. She seemed to have made me her personal project, or I could take a different approach. The next snowstorm hit on January 28th. It was a big one, forecast to drop over a foot of snow. I watched the weather reports carefully. This storm was coming in on a Thursday night and would continue through Friday morning. Perfect timing. Thursday evening, I prepared my snow blower but did not start it. I watched from my window as the snow began to fall, thick and heavy. By midnight, there were already 6 inches on the ground. By 6 in the morning, when I normally would have started clearing, there were 14 inches with more coming down. I made coffee and watched. Around 7:30, I saw the first problem develop. A delivery truck trying to reach the back section of the neighborhood turned onto the access road and immediately got stuck. The driver tried to rock the truck back and forth, but only managed to dig deeper into the snow. At 8, my doorbell rang. It was my neighbor, George Patterson, who lived in the back section. He was a retired postal worker, nice guy, early 70s. "Trevor, sorry to bother you, but any chance you could clear the access road? I have a doctor's appointment at 9:30 and I cannot get out." I felt bad, I genuinely did. "George, I wish I could help, but the HOA has fined me for my snow removal method. I cannot afford to keep getting hit with $250 fines." "What? That is ridiculous. Your method works fine. Tell that to Patricia Hendricks. She is the one who issued the fine." George looked frustrated. "That woman is going to be the death of this neighborhood. All right, I will try to find another way out." He left, and I felt a pang of guilt, but I had made my decision. If the HOA wanted to dictate how I maintained a road I had no legal obligation to maintain, then they could maintain it themselves. By 9 in the morning, the situation had escalated. The stuck delivery truck was blocking the entire access road. 3 other cars were lined up behind it, unable to get through. My phone started ringing. First it was Linda from the HOA board. "Trevor, we have a situation with the access road. Can you please clear it?" "I would love to help, Linda, but I have been fined for my snow removal method." I cannot risk additional fines. This is an emergency. People cannot get out. Then maybe the HOA should handle it. It is your responsibility, right? There was a pause. Trevor, please, we can discuss the fine later. The fine and the method requirement. I am not changing how I clear snow, and I am not paying that ridiculous fine. She hung up. 10 minutes later, Patricia called. This was going to be interesting. Mr. Whitmore, you need to clear the access road immediately. We have residents trapped. Good morning, Patricia. As I explained to Linda, I have been fined for my snow removal method. Until that fine is rescinded and I am allowed to use my own method, I will not be clearing the road. This is completely unacceptable. You have a responsibility to this community. Actually, I do not. The access road is not HOA property. It is a private easement across my property. I have been maintaining it as a courtesy, but the HOA has no legal authority to fine me or dictate my methods. I could practically hear her jaw clench over the phone. We will see about that. This is not over. She hung up. I watched from my window as the chaos unfolded. The delivery truck driver had called a tow truck, but the tow truck could not get through because of the snow on the access road. It was a perfect catch-22. Around 11, the snow finally stopped. We had gotten 16 inches total. The access road was completely impassable. My own driveway was buried too, but I was not planning on going anywhere. I worked from home on Fridays anyway, doing paperwork and scheduling for my landscaping business. Marcus from the HOA board showed up at my door around noon. He looked tired. Trevor, can we talk? Off the record. I invited him in and made coffee. We sat at my kitchen table. Look, I think Patricia overstepped with this fine, he started. I did not agree with it, but she pushed it through. She can be very forceful, I noticed. Is there any way you could just clear the road? I will personally work on getting the fine canceled. I shook my head. Marcus, I appreciate you trying to mediate, but here is the thing. That road is not HOA property. I looked it up with my lawyer. I have zero legal obligation to maintain it. I have been doing it out of courtesy for 5 years, and the thanks I get is a $250 fine for doing it wrong. No. The HOA wants to create rules about that road, then the HOA can maintain it. Do you know how much it would cost to hire a commercial snow removal company to clear that road? Not my problem. You have a budget, right? Use it. Marcus rubbed his face. This is going to get ugly. Patricia made it ugly. I am just responding appropriately. He left without finishing his coffee. I felt a little bad about putting him in the middle, but he had voted for the fine too, even if reluctantly. By 2 in the afternoon, the HOA had managed to contact a commercial snow removal company. I watched as their truck arrived, a big plow with mountain-clear snow services on the side. The driver assessed the situation, talked on his phone for a while, then started working. It took him over 2 hours to clear the access road, mostly because he had to deal with the stuck delivery truck first, which required a separate tow truck to finally extract. I later found out the HOA paid $850 for that emergency snow removal. My homeowner's dues were going toward that now, instead of toward the community pool maintenance or the landscaping of the common areas. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for February 8th, and I made sure to attend. The community clubhouse was packed. Apparently, word had gotten out about the access road situation, and people had opinions. Patricia called the meeting to order, looking as composed as ever. She was wearing a navy blue blazer and had a folder of documents in front of her. Our first order of business is addressing the access road maintenance issue that occurred on January 28th. Several hands shot up. She ignored them and continued. Due to Mr. Whitmore's refusal to maintain the access road, the HOA was forced to hire an emergency snow removal service at considerable expense. We will be discussing how to prevent this situation in the future. George Patterson, my neighbor, stood up without being called on. Now hold on just a minute. From what I understand, Trevor has been maintaining that road as a volunteer for 5 years. The HOA fined him for how he was doing it, so he stopped. That seems perfectly reasonable to me. Several people murmured in agreement. Patricia's expression tightened. Mr. Patterson, there are procedures for addressing HOA fines. Mr. Whitmore could have appealed through the proper channels instead of abandoning his responsibilities. His responsibilities? I stood up. Patricia, that road is not HOA property. I have no responsibility to maintain it. I was doing it as a courtesy, which you decided to punish me for. Marcus looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Linda was studying her notes intently. Another resident, a woman named Karen Thompson who lived near the access road, spoke up. I am confused. If the road is not HOA property, whose property is it? It is an easement across private property, I explained. Mine and 2 other lots. The HOA has the right to use it for access, but maintenance is not assigned to anyone. Karen looked at Patricia. So we have been relying on Trevor to maintain this road for free for 5 years, and then we find him for doing it wrong. Am I understanding this correctly? Patricia shuffled her papers. The HOA maintains all community roads. This road serves the community, therefore it falls under our purview. That is not what my deed says, I countered. And my lawyer confirmed it. You have no legal authority over that road. The meeting devolved into chaos. People were arguing back and forth. Some sided with me, saying the fine was ridiculous. Others, particularly those who lived in the back section and relied on the access road, were more concerned about ensuring it got maintained regardless of who was right or wrong. Finally, Marcus banged the gavel. Okay, everyone calm down. Let us approach this logically. Trevor, if we rescind the fine and remove any requirements about your snow removal method, would you be willing to continue maintaining the access road? I had thought about this question carefully. No. The room erupted again. Marcus banged the gavel harder. Let me explain, I continued. This situation has shown me that the HOA, or at least certain members of the board, are willing to punish me for helping. I am not going to put myself in that position again. The HOA needs to take official responsibility for that road and budget for its maintenance. Patricia finally lost her composure. This is extortion. You are holding the community hostage. No, I am setting boundaries. There is a difference. The meeting went on for another hour, but nothing was resolved. The fine against me still stood, which I had no intention of paying. And I had no intention of maintaining the access road. Over the next few weeks, February brought more snow. Each time, the HOA had to hire commercial snow removal. The costs were adding up. I heard through the neighborhood gossip chain that they had spent over $3,000 so far. The HOA budget was not set up for this kind of expense. Fees would need to increase. In early March, I received a certified letter from the HOA attorney. It was a formal demand that I resume maintenance of the access road and pay the outstanding fine plus late fees, now totaling $400. The letter claimed that by purchasing my property, I had assumed responsibility for maintaining the access road as the previous owner had done. I took the letter to David Chen. He read it and actually laughed. This is absurd. Volunteer actions by a previous owner do not create binding obligations for future owners. That is not how property law works. So I can ignore this. Let me send them a response. I want to make it very clear that they are on shaky legal ground here. David drafted a response that essentially said the HOA had no legal basis for their demands, and that any further attempts to fine me or compel me to maintain the road would be considered harassment. He sent it certified mail. The HOA attorney backed off after that, but Patricia did not. She began a campaign of petty harassment. She would drive by my property daily, taking pictures of anything that could possibly be a violation. My grass was a quarter-inch too long, violation notice. I left my garbage bin out 2 hours past collection time, violation notice. A package was on my porch for more than 24 hours. You guessed it, violation notice. Each violation came with a $50 to $100 fine. It was death by 1,000 cuts. I kept meticulous records of everything and had David send another letter, this time threatening legal action for targeted harassment. Meanwhile, the access road situation was getting worse. Spring in Colorado means unpredictable weather. We would get warm days that melted snow, followed by freezing nights that created ice. The access road, without regular maintenance, became a hazard. The commercial snow removal company the HOA hired only came for major snow events, not for daily maintenance. In late March, an ambulance had to respond to a medical emergency at one of the back section homes. George Patterson's wife had fallen and possibly broken her hip. The ambulance got stuck on the access road because of ice buildup. It took them an extra 15 minutes to reach the house, 15 minutes that could have been critical. George came to my door the next day, but he was not angry. He looked defeated. "Trevor, I know you are in a tough spot with the HOA. I do not blame you for what happened yesterday. That is on Patricia and her power trip, but something has got to give. My wife is okay, thank God, but what if she was not? George, I am sorry about your wife, truly. But I do not know what you want me to do. Every time I try to help this community, I get punished for it. I know. I have been talking to other residents. We are organizing to remove Patricia from the board. There is going to be a special election. Would you consider resuming maintenance if we get new leadership?" I thought about it. Maybe. But only with a formal, written agreement that specifies I am doing this voluntarily and can stop at any time. And absolutely no rules about how I do it, he nodded. "That is fair. Let me see what I can do." The special election was scheduled for mid-April. The rules required 20% of homeowners to petition for it, and George's coalition got 30%. Patricia fought it every step of the way, claiming procedural violations, but the HOA bylaws were clear. During the campaign period, I kept documenting every violation notice Patricia sent me. I was up to 37 notices in 2 months, totaling over $3,000 in fines. David advised me not to pay any of them. We were building a harassment case. The election meeting was intense. Patricia gave a speech about maintaining standards and how she had tried to professionalize the HOA. George spoke about common sense and community values. When the votes were counted, Patricia lost by a landslide. Marcus was elected as the new president, and 2 new board members were brought in to replace Patricia and 1 other board member who had supported her. I figured that was the end of it. Patricia would fade into the background and things would return to normal. I was wrong. 2 weeks after losing the election, Patricia filed a lawsuit against me personally. Not through the HOA, but as an individual homeowner. The lawsuit claimed that my failure to maintain the access road had damaged her property value and caused her emotional distress. She was seeking $25,000 in damages. David was not worried when I showed him the paperwork. "This is frivolous. It will get tossed out, but we need to respond to it properly." We filed a motion to dismiss and also filed a countersuit for harassment, including all the documentation of the excessive violation notices. The legal process moved slowly. Months passed. The new HOA board, led by Marcus, approached me in May with a formal agreement. They would officially take responsibility for the access road maintenance going forward, hiring a property management company to handle it. They also rescinded all my fines and issued a formal apology. As a peace offering, they asked if I would be willing to consult on the maintenance plan since I had experience with the property. I agreed and helped them set up a reasonable maintenance schedule. The property management company they hired did a decent job, though I noticed they used my spiral snow removal method come next winter. Nobody complained about it. Patricia's lawsuit was dismissed in August with prejudice, meaning she could not refile it. The judge noted in his written opinion that the claims were without merit and bordered on vexatious litigation. Our countersuit was still pending. That is when things took a bizarre turn. In September, I started noticing strange things around my property. Someone had spray-painted orange X marks on my trees. My mailbox was knocked over twice in 1 week. Someone dumped a bag of garbage on my driveway. I installed security cameras. The footage I got was damning. Patricia, captured in clear high-definition video, was the one vandalizing my property. In one particularly brazen incident, she used a key to scratch the paint on my work truck while it was parked in my driveway. I took the footage to the Boulder County Sheriff's Office and filed a criminal complaint. Deputies went to Patricia's house and arrested her for criminal mischief and trespassing. The charges were misdemeanors, but they were on the record. The court date for the criminal charges was in November. Patricia showed up with an expensive attorney who tried to argue that the stress of the HOA situation had caused her to act irrationally. The prosecutor was not sympathetic. Patricia was convicted and sentenced to 6 months probation, $1,000 in fines, and ordered to pay restitution for the damage to my property, which totaled about $3,000. Our civil harassment countersuit settled out of court. Patricia's insurance paid out $15,000, and she was required to sign an agreement that she would have no contact with me and would not interfere with my property in any way. The whole ordeal finally ended in December, almost a full year after that first violation notice about my snow removal method. Patricia and her husband quietly sold their house and moved away. I heard through the neighborhood gossip that they relocated to Arizona. Good riddance. The access road was being maintained professionally now, funded through HOA dues. It cost the association about $6,000 per year, which worked out to about $15 per household per month. Most residents considered it money well spent after the chaos of the previous year. George Patterson stopped by in late December with a bottle of bourbon. We sat on my porch, even though it was cold, and watched the sun set over the mountains. "Hell of a year," he said. "That is an understatement. You know, I feel bad that you got dragged through all that." "You were just trying to help," I shrugged. I learned an important lesson about setting boundaries. I was doing something out of kindness and it was being taken for granted. Then, when it was used against me, I stood up for myself. I would do it the same way again. Patricia was something else. I still cannot believe she went as far as she did. Some people cannot handle not being in control. She built her whole identity around being HOA president, and when that was taken away, she spiraled. We sipped our bourbon in comfortable silence. The neighborhood was peaceful, covered in a fresh layer of snow that sparkled under the streetlights. The access road was clearly plowed, neat parallel lines just like Patricia's precious guidelines required. I found that ironically amusing. The next morning, a Saturday, I was doing some paperwork when my doorbell rang. It was Marcus from the HOA board. "Hey Trevor, got a minute?" "Sure, come on in." He looked nervous, which was unusual for him. We sat in my living room. "So the board wanted me to run something by you." "Completely optional, no pressure whatsoever." I waited. "We are looking at doing some improvements to the common areas this spring. Landscaping, new plants, maybe a new irrigation system. Given that you run a landscaping company, we wondered if you might be interested in bidding on the project." I smiled. "You know what, Marcus, I appreciate you asking. Let me think about it and get back to you. No rush. And Trevor, just so you know, the board really values having you as part of this community. What happened with Patricia, that was not representative of how we want to operate." After he left, I did think about it. Part of me wanted nothing to do with the HOA ever again, but the larger part recognized that the community itself was not the problem. Patricia had been the problem, and she was gone. I ended up submitting a bid for the landscaping project. It was competitive but fair. The HOA board accepted it in January, and I started work in April once the ground thawed. Working on the common areas was actually enjoyable. Residents would stop and chat while I worked, thanking me for making the neighborhood look nice. Nobody complained about my methods or techniques. Nobody measured the height of my mulch piles or the angle of my trimming. It was just good, honest work with appreciation at the end. One afternoon in May, I was planting some new shrubs near the clubhouse when a car pulled up. A woman in her 30s got out, looking around the neighborhood with interest. She introduced herself as Jennifer Martinez, and she was thinking about buying a house in Pinewood Hills. "What is it like living here?" she asked me. "I've heard HOAs can be hit or miss." I sat back on my heels, considering my answer. It is a good community. Like anywhere, it depends on the people. We went through some leadership issues last year, but the current board is solid. They are reasonable people who care about the neighborhood without being tyrants about it. That is good to hear. I have heard horror stories about HOAs fining people for ridiculous things. I laughed. "Yeah, we had some of that. It got resolved, though. My advice: read your CC and Articles carefully. Know your property boundaries and rights, and do not be afraid to stand up for yourself if something is unreasonable. But also be a good neighbor. Help out when you can. Most problems come from either too much power or too little communication." She thanked me and went on her way. I went back to my planting, thinking about how much had changed in a year and a half. The experience with Patricia and the access road had taught me several valuable lessons. First, no good deed goes unpunished if there are people around looking for things to punish. Second, knowing your legal rights is crucial. If I had not bothered to check my property deed and consult with my lawyer, I might have just paid those fines and changed my methods, despite being in the right. Third, sometimes you have to let situations get worse before they can get better. The access road had to become a real problem before the community would address the underlying issues with HOA leadership. But perhaps the most important lesson was about community itself. Pinewood Hills was not defined by Patricia Hendricks or even by the HOA board. It was defined by people like George Patterson and his wife, Marcus trying to do his best in a difficult situation, and dozens of other residents who just wanted a nice place to live. When pushed, the community had made the right choice. Summer arrived and Colorado showed off its best weather. My landscaping business was booming, and the HOA common areas were looking better than ever. I had developed a good working relationship with the board, built on mutual respect and clear boundaries. In July, the HOA organized a community barbecue at the clubhouse. I was not usually one for neighborhood social events, but I figured I should make an appearance. I brought potato salad and my portable speaker for music. The turnout was impressive. Families with kids, retirees, young couples, all mixing together. George was manning the grill, spatula in hand, directing traffic like a conductor. Someone had set up a volleyball net and a game was getting competitive. Linda, the HOA treasurer, approached me with a plate of food. "Trevor, I wanted to thank you again for everything you did. I know it was not easy standing up to Patricia. I was just protecting my interests." "Maybe, but you also showed the rest of us that we did not have to accept unreasonable behavior from our leadership. That took courage." Marcus joined us, balancing a burger and a beer. "Are we talking about the great snow removal war?" "I thought we agreed never to speak of it again," I joked. "Fair enough. New topic. Trevor, have you thought about joining the HOA board? We have an opening for a general member position." I almost choked on my drink. "You want me on the HOA board, after everything that happened, especially after everything that happened? You understand property rights, you are reasonable, and you are not afraid to speak up. That is exactly what we need." I shook my head firmly. "I appreciate the offer, but no. I have learned that I am much happier as a regular resident who occasionally does contract work. I do not want the responsibility of governance." "Cannot blame you for that," Marcus said. "But if you ever change your mind, the offer stands." The party went on until after dark. Kids chased fireflies while adults sat around the fire pit telling stories. It felt like an actual community, not just a collection of houses bound by property lines and regulations. Walking home that night, I passed the access road. It was well maintained, clearly marked, and completely functional. Nobody would ever know the battle that had been fought over it. In a way, that was how it should be. The road served its purpose quietly and efficiently, just like it always had. My phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from David Chen, my lawyer. The subject line read, "Case closed." I opened it. "Trevor, just wanted to let you know that all legal matters related to the HOA situation have been formally closed. The restitution from Patricia has been processed and should hit your account in 3 to 5 business days. All liens and outstanding fines have been permanently removed from your property record. You are completely clear. It was a pleasure working with you on this. Here is hoping your future dealings with the HOA are much more boring. Best, David." I smiled and pocketed my phone. Boring sounded perfect. The following winter was blissfully uneventful. The property management company maintained the access road without drama. Snow was removed in efficient, professional patterns that nobody complained about because nobody had the time or energy to care about snow pile aesthetics. Emergency vehicles had clear access. Residents got to work on time. Everything functioned as it should. I focused on my business, which continued to grow. The work I did on the HOA common areas led to several private clients in the neighborhood hiring me for their yards. My reputation in Pinewood Hills shifted from "that guy who fought with the HOA" to "that guy who does great landscaping work." In March, I was working on a retaining wall project for a client when I saw a moving truck at Patricia's old house. The property had sold quickly, and new owners were moving in. A young family with 2 kids and a dog. The kids were running around excitedly while their parents directed the movers. Later that day, the husband came over to introduce himself. His name was Tom Winters, and his wife was Hannah. The kids were 6 and 8. "We are excited to be here," Tom said. "The neighborhood seems great. The previous owner of our house told us there was some drama last year with the HOA. There was some disagreement about maintenance responsibilities," I said carefully. "It got resolved. The current board is good people. You should not have any problems." That is what the realtor said too. She mentioned you were the one who fought the battle and won." I shrugged. "I just stood up for what was right. Sometimes that is all it takes." We chatted for a while longer. Tom mentioned he worked in finance, and his wife was a teacher. They had moved from Denver looking for more space and a better sense of community. I welcomed them to the neighborhood and offered to help if they needed anything. As spring turned to summer, life in Pinewood Hills settled into a comfortable rhythm. The drama of the access road conflict faded into neighborhood lore, the kind of story people would reference with a knowing laugh. Remember when Patricia lost her mind over snow removal methods? George Patterson and I developed a solid friendship. We would get together every few weeks, sometimes for bourbon on the porch, sometimes for golf at the municipal course. He had a great perspective on life, shaped by decades of experience and a refusal to take himself too seriously. "You know what the key to dealing with HOAs is," he told me one evening. "Pick your battles. Most stuff is not worth fighting about. But when something really matters, when it is a question of principle or rights, you dig in and do not budge." You did that, and the whole neighborhood is better for it. The HOA board continued to function well under Marcus's leadership. They made decisions based on common sense rather than rigid adherence to arbitrary rules. When issues came up, they communicated clearly with residents and sought input before making major changes. It was night and day compared to Patricia's reign. In August, I got a call from David Chen. "Trevor, you will not believe this. Remember Patricia Hendricks?" Hard to forget. "She just filed for bankruptcy. Personal, not business. Looks like her legal fees and the restitution payment really hit her hard financially." "That is unfortunate," I said, and I meant it. I had not wanted to destroy Patricia's life. I just wanted her to stop interfering with mine. There is more. She has also been sued by her HOA in Arizona for harassment of neighbors down there. Apparently, she has not learned her lesson. Some people never do. After hanging up, I felt a mix of emotions. Vindication, sure, but also sadness. Patricia had let her need for control consume her to the point where it destroyed her finances, her reputation, and apparently her ability to live peacefully anywhere. It was a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ego and misplaced priorities. That fall, the HOA held elections for regular board positions. There was no drama, no controversy. People nominated reasonable candidates who wanted to contribute to the community. The candidates laid out sensible platforms. Residents voted. Democracy functioned as it should. At the annual HOA meeting in November, Marcus gave a State of the Community address. He talked about completed projects, the financial health of the association, and plans for the coming year. He also took a moment to reflect on the previous year's turmoil. "We learned some hard lessons," he said. "We learned that leadership is about service, not power. We learned that rules should serve the community, not the other way around. And we learned that standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult, is essential to maintaining a healthy community." I want to thank everyone who contributed to getting us back on track. People applauded. A few looked my way and nodded. I appreciated the acknowledgement but did not need it. The real reward was living in a neighborhood that functioned properly again. As the meeting wrapped up, several residents came up to talk with me. Some wanted to discuss landscaping projects. Others just wanted to chat. One elderly woman, Mrs. Chen, who lived 3 streets over, grabbed my hand. "Young man, you did a brave thing last year. My husband and I were so worried about this neighborhood under that awful woman's control. Thank you for standing up to her." "I was just protecting myself, Mrs. Chen." "No, it was more than that. You showed the rest of us that we did not have to accept bullying from our own HOA. That mattered." Driving home that night, I reflected on the entire saga. It had started with something so trivial, the pattern in which I cleared snow, and had escalated into lawsuits, harassment, and ultimately criminal charges. All because one person could not accept that she did not have authority over every aspect of the neighborhood. But out of that conflict had come positive changes. The HOA was more transparent now. Residents were more engaged. People understood their rights and were not afraid to speak up when something seemed wrong. The community was stronger for having gone through the struggle. Winter came again, and with it, snow. The property management company maintained the access road efficiently. I maintained my own driveway using my spiral method, and nobody said a word about it. The snow arced beautifully through the air and landed in irregular but functional piles. It worked, and that was all that mattered. On a particularly cold morning in January, almost exactly 2 years after the initial violation notice, I was drinking coffee and looking out at the snow-covered landscape when my doorbell rang. It was Tom Winters, the neighbor who had bought Patricia's old house. "Hey, Trevor, sorry to bother you so early. My snow blower died and I have got to get to work. Any chance I could borrow yours?" "Sure, let me show you how it works." I walked him through the controls, showed him how to adjust the chute direction, and explained the most efficient clearing pattern. "Wait, you do a spiral? That is genius. I have always just gone back and forth. It is faster and easier, plus you do not have to keep turning the machine around." "Why does not everyone do it this way?" I laughed. "That is a longer story than we have time for this morning. Just use whatever method works for you." He thanked me and got to work on his driveway. I watched from my window as he experimented with the spiral pattern, getting the hang of it quickly. The snow flew through the air in those familiar arcs. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. "Board meeting tonight. Can you swing by? Want to run something past you about spring landscaping plans." I texted back, "Sure, what time?" 7 at the clubhouse. That evening I walked over to the clubhouse. The temperature had dropped into the single digits and my breath crystallized in the air. The sky was clear, stars brilliant against the darkness. The access road was clear and well lit, safe for anyone who needed to use it. The meeting was informal. Just Marcus, Linda, and 2 other board members sitting around a table with coffee and some cookies Linda had brought. "Thanks for coming," Marcus said. "We are planning the spring landscaping budget and wanted your input on priorities. What do you think needs the most attention?" We spent an hour discussing drainage issues near the mailboxes, some aging trees that needed to be evaluated for disease, and ideas for adding some color to the entrance area. It was productive and collegial. Nobody was fighting for control or trying to enforce arbitrary rules. We were just neighbors working together to maintain a nice community. Walking home after the meeting, I felt genuinely content. The access road situation, as frustrating and expensive as it had been, had ultimately led to positive change. Sometimes you have to draw a hard line to force necessary conversations and reforms. February brought more snow, but by March, spring was teasing us with warmer days. I started the landscaping work for the HOA's spring projects. The drainage issue was solved with some strategic regrading and new culverts. The diseased trees were treated where possible and removed where necessary. We planted native wildflowers at the entrance that would bloom in rotating colors throughout the summer. One afternoon, while I was working on the entrance landscaping, an elderly couple walking their dog stopped to watch. "This is going to look beautiful," the woman said. "You do wonderful work." "Thank you. It should really pop once everything starts blooming." "Are you the young man who had all that trouble with Patricia Hendricks a couple of years ago?" "That was me." The husband shook his head. "That woman was a menace. We were so glad when she finally left. Best thing that could have happened to this neighborhood. It worked out in the end, I said diplomatically. It did, thanks to you. Takes courage to stand up to bullies, especially when they have official authority. My wife and I really appreciated what you did. They continued their walk, and I went back to planting. These small interactions happened regularly now. People remembered the conflict and appreciated the outcome. It was validating in a quiet way. Summer arrived in full force, and the entrance landscaping exceeded expectations. The wildflowers created a riot of color that changed week by week. Residents would slow down when entering the neighborhood just to appreciate it. Several people took photos and posted them on the neighborhood Facebook group. The HOA board asked me to give a presentation at a community meeting about native landscaping and water conservation. I put together a slideshow with examples and practical tips. The turnout was impressive, about 40 residents, all genuinely interested in learning. During the Q&A session, someone asked about the access road conflict. I know this is off topic, but a lot of us are new to the neighborhood. What exactly happened with that access road situation? We have heard bits and pieces, but never the full story. I glanced at Marcus, who shrugged as if to say it was up to me. The short version is that I was maintaining the access road voluntarily, and the previous HOA president decided to fine me for my snow removal method. I pointed out that the road was not actually HOA property, and I had no obligation to maintain it. Things escalated from there. It got resolved when the community elected new leadership that was more focused on common sense than arbitrary rules. But you could have just paid the fine and avoided all the trouble, right? I could have. But the fine was unjust. I was being punished for helping. That did not sit right with me. Sometimes you have to stand on principle even when the easier path is just to comply. A younger woman in the back raised her hand. I think what you did was important. HOAs can abuse their authority if nobody pushes back. You set a precedent that residents have rights. The meeting moved back to landscaping topics, but that exchange stuck with me. The access road conflict had become a defining moment for Pinewood Hills, a line in the sand that established what kind of community we wanted to be. As summer turned to fall, I was working on a private landscaping project when George Patterson called me. "Trevor, you have got a minute. I need some advice." "Sure, what is up?" "The HOA board wants me to join. Marcus is stepping down at the end of his term, and they think I would be a good president." "What do you think?" "I think you would be great, George. You are level-headed, people respect you, and you genuinely care about the community. I am worried about the time commitment. And honestly, after watching what you went through with Patricia, I am not sure I want to deal with potential conflict." "Here is the thing, George. The conflict happened because Patricia was the wrong person in that position. She saw it as power instead of service. You would not make that mistake. And yes, it is a time commitment, but you are retired and looking for ways to contribute. This could be perfect for you." He was quiet for a moment. "All right, I will do it. But if I turn into Patricia, I want you to stage an intervention. Deal? But that is not going to happen." George joined the board in October and was elected president in November. His leadership style was collaborative and transparent. He would regularly walk the neighborhood, talking to residents about their concerns and ideas. He brought that feedback to board meetings and made sure decisions reflected community input. Under George's leadership, the HOA commissioned a full review of all rules and regulations. They eliminated outdated or overly restrictive policies. They clarified ambiguous language. They established clear appeal processes for violations. The result was a leaner, more sensible set of guidelines that most residents could actually follow without constant anxiety. The second winter after the conflict was a heavy snow year. Storm after storm dumped snow on Colorado. The property management company earned their fee, keeping the access road clear and safe. Nobody complained about snow pile aesthetics. Nobody got fined for their driveway clearing methods. It was beautifully boring. In February, I got an unexpected letter. It was from Patricia Hendricks. The letter was handwritten, several pages long. In it, Patricia apologized for her behavior during the access road conflict and its aftermath. She explained that she had been dealing with personal issues at the time her marriage was falling apart. She was struggling with anxiety and control issues, and becoming HOA president had given her an outlet for those problems in unhealthy ways. She took full responsibility for her actions. She acknowledged that she had been wrong to fine me, wrong to harass me, and wrong to escalate the situation to vandalism. She did not make excuses or try to justify anything. She simply said she was sorry and hoped that one day I might be able to forgive her. The letter concluded with an update on her life. She and her husband had divorced. She was in therapy working on her control issues. She had moved to a small town in Arizona where she was trying to start fresh and be a better person. I read the letter 3 times. Part of me was skeptical. Was this genuine remorse or just another manipulation? But the more I read it, the more I thought it might be authentic. People can change, even difficult people like Patricia. I wrote back. I kept it brief but sincere. I accepted her apology and wished her well in her journey. I meant it. Holding on to anger serves nobody. Patricia had faced consequences for her actions. She was trying to do better. That was enough. Spring came early that year. By mid-March, the snow had mostly melted and the ground was thawing. I started planning the year's landscaping projects. The HOA had approved a budget for some ambitious improvements, including a new walking trail around the perimeter of the community. The trail project took most of April and May. It was a significant undertaking, requiring grading, gravel base, decomposed granite surface, and strategic plantings along the route. I hired 2 additional workers to help with the labor. The trail opened in June with a small ribbon cutting ceremony. George gave a short speech about community and connection. Kids immediately started using it for bike rides. Older residents used it for morning walks. It became a central feature of the neighborhood, a place where people naturally encountered each other and built relationships. One evening, I was walking the trail myself, just enjoying the sunset, when I ran into Jennifer Martinez, the woman who had been considering buying in Pinewood Hills and had asked me about the HOA. She had ended up purchasing a house on Spruce Street. "Trevor, I wanted to thank you. Your advice about HOAs was spot on. I read everything carefully and I have not had any issues. This is such a great community. Glad it worked out for you. How are you settling in?" "Really well. Everyone has been so welcoming, and this trail is amazing. My kids use it every day." We walked together for a while, talking about the neighborhood and her experience so far. It struck me how different this conversation was from those I might have had 3 years ago. The community had healed and grown stronger. That summer, I took a vacation for the first time in years. I drove up to Montana for some hiking and fishing. It was refreshing to completely disconnect from work and HOA business and just enjoy nature. When I got back, George had left a note on my door asking me to call him. I did. "Hey Trevor, welcome back. Hope you had a good trip. Listen, something came up while you were gone. Nothing major, but the property management company we hired for the access road. They are going out of business. We need to find a new contractor." "Okay, do you need recommendations?" "Actually, We were wondering if you might be interested in taking on the contract. We would pay the same rate we were paying the management company. It would be official in writing with clear terms. I thought about it. Let me think it over and I will get back to you. It was tempting from a business perspective. The contract would provide steady income and was not particularly demanding work, but I was hesitant because of the history. Did I really want to tie myself back to that access road after everything that had happened? I talked it through with a few trusted friends outside the neighborhood. The consensus was that it was a different situation now. It would be a formal business arrangement with fair compensation and clear terms, not a volunteer situation that could be exploited. I called George back a few days later. I will do it, but with conditions. Everything in writing, clear scope of work, payment on a set schedule, and a termination clause that allows either party to end the arrangement with 30 days' notice if it is not working out. Absolutely. I will have Linda draft a contract, and we will review it at the next board meeting. Thanks, Trevor. This actually works out great because you know the road better than anyone. The contract was straightforward and fair. I signed it in July and started maintaining the access road again in my official capacity as a contractor. There was something satisfying about doing the same work I had done voluntarily years before, but now with proper recognition and compensation. Fall arrived with its spectacular Colorado color display. The aspens turned gold, the scrub oak flamed red, and the sky stayed that deep autumn blue that makes you grateful to be alive. The neighborhood looked stunning. The HOA organized a fall festival in October. There was a chili cook-off, pumpkin carving for the kids, and a bonfire as evening fell. I contributed a pot of my green chili, which did not win but got some compliments. As the festival wound down and people started heading home, George pulled me aside. You know, Trevor, I have been thinking about everything that happened with Patricia and the access road. In a weird way, it was the best thing that could have happened to this neighborhood. That is one way to look at it. No, seriously. Before all that, people were disengaged. Nobody paid attention to what the HOA was doing. We just assumed everything was being handled properly. Your conflict with Patricia woke everyone up. It made us realize we had to be active participants in our community, not just passive residents. We are better for it. I guess that is true. It certainly changed how the board operates. It changed how the whole community operates. We are more connected, more engaged, more willing to speak up when something is not right. That is valuable. We watched the bonfire burn down to embers, the last few people chatting quietly around its warmth. George was right. The conflict had been difficult, but it had forced necessary change. The community that emerged from it was healthier and stronger. As winter approached again, I found myself looking forward to snow season rather than dreading it. Maintaining the access road was now just another job, one I was being fairly compensated for. There was no drama, no violation notices, no walking on eggshells wondering if someone was going to find fault with my methods. The first major snow of the season came in late November, about 8 inches overnight. I was up early with my snow blower, clearing the access road in my efficient spiral pattern. The snow arced through the air, landing in those familiar irregular piles that had once caused so much controversy. Now they were just snow piles, serving their function without comment. Tom Winters, my neighbor in Patricia's old house, came out to clear his driveway while I was working. He waved and shouted over the noise of our machines. "Hey, I have been using your spiral method all season. Works great," I gave him a thumbs up. It was a small moment, but it made me smile. The method that had been deemed unacceptable and worth a fine was now being adopted by others, because it was simply more efficient. As December arrived, I reflected on how much had changed in 3 years. The access road that had been the source of so much conflict was now just a road, maintained professionally without drama. The HOA that had been wielded as a weapon by Patricia was now a functional organization focused on community service. The neighborhood that had been divided and anxious was now cohesive and engaged, and me. I had learned to set boundaries, stand up for myself, and fight when necessary. But I had also learned to forgive, move forward, and contribute to my community in meaningful ways. The experience had made me stronger and more confident. On Christmas Eve, George organized a neighborhood caroling event. About 20 of us bundled up and walked the streets singing slightly off-key versions of classic carols. We ended up at the clubhouse for hot chocolate and cookies. It was corny and wonderful. As the year ended, I felt genuinely grateful. Grateful for the community, for good neighbors, for reasonable leadership, and for having had the courage to stand up when it mattered. The access road conflict was now just a story, one that would be told to new residents as an example of how communities can overcome challenges and emerge stronger. The snow continued to fall, the roads were maintained, and life went on peacefully in Pinewood Hills. Sometimes the best endings are the quiet ones, where everything simply works as it should, and that is more than enough.